Chapter 2. Two Aunts and a Mercedes. "That's not them, is it?" Harry pleaded with himself. "It can't be. Please let it not be them." It was a country railway station with flower beds and a long platform. Harry stood at one end where he dismounted. A fair boy in a worn anorak, trousers several sizes too small for him, and a shabby suitcase by his side. All he possessed in the world. Carriage doors slammed. The guard waved his flags. Slowly gathering speed, the train slid past him and was gone. Harry watched as the passengers who had left the train made their way to the entrance. Soon the platform was empty except for two elderly and very old-looking women who stood at the far end. One was tall and thin, and from the angle Harry saw how her much resembled the front view of a camel, though when she put on a large straw hat she at once turned into a standard lamp. The other, shorter and plumper, reminded him of a cheerful piece of confectionery, a pink meringue topped by a swirl of butter icing. Harry looked all around, hopefully, but there was no one else. Then his fears were confirmed. The meringue waved a little handkerchief and began a wobbling run up the platform. "I don't believe it," Harry whispered to himself. "This is not happening to me." Briefly he contemplated flight. The flattering old lady drew closer all the time, crying "Oh, oh!" and pressing her handkerchief to her face. Though she could not have been less than 60 or 70 years old, her hair was dyed with a vivid butter yellow and bounced in curls about her face. She had large baby blue eyes, badly made up, and a slash of vermilion lipstick for a mouth. Her nails and toenails were varnished to match. "Cooey!" A little pink hat fell over one ear as she ran. A profusion of floating filmy garments billowed about her like a cloud in disarray. "Harry!" she gasped as she came close, catching him by the hands and holding on at arm's length. "Harry Barton! Oh, my darling, I'm your great Aunt Florrie!" And right there on the platform she planted a big, lipsticky kiss on his cheek and enveloped him in a cloud of expensive perfume. Harry was still reeling from the shocked horror of this welcome as his second aunt arrived beside him. In every way she seemed a contrast to her sister. Not only was she taller and thin as a toasting fork, her iron grey hair was cropped short, and round granny glasses sat on the bridge of her nose that was hooked like the beak of an eagle. Behind those bright spectacles the eyes were blue and sharp and clever. The long brown face, devoid of make-up, was clever also. So was the thin, humorous mouth. She wore a grey, figure-fitting costume with a rather long skirt, and a white blouse with a cameo of a very startling gentleman at the throat. Firmly she shook Harry by the hand. "And I'm your great Aunt Bridget." Her voice did nothing to dispel Harry's impression of a Victorian governess or a strict headmistress. "I suggest you call me Aunt or Aunt Bridget. None of this great aunt nonsense. Makes me sound as old as Methuselah, which, contrary to all appearances, and however it may seem to you, I am not. And you can call me Aunt Florrie, dear, won't you?" She hugged him afresh like a pink koala bear and smeared his other cheek with lipstick. "Leave the boy alone, Florrie, for goodness sake." Aunt Bridget expressed herself with vigour. "A couple of prehistoric old wrinklies like us. It's a wonder he hasn't run a mile. The very sight of us must give him the heebie-jeebies, without you mothering and smothering him every second." In some embarrassment Harry looked away, but Aunt Florrie laughed merrily as he looked back. His eyes were caught by the cameo at Aunt Bridget's neck. She glanced down. "Ah, do you know who it is?" It was the portrait of a ruffian with a ferocious and bloodthirsty expression. He had a heavy beard, one cheek was slashed, and about his brow was a tangle of scarves topped by a ragged hat. Harry shook his head. "That dear nephew is Captain Henry Morgan, the Buccaneer. Isn't he splendid?" She touched it with a long brown hand. "A notorious pirate chief who roamed the Spanish Main. A freebooting, and I have to say thoroughly wicked man. One of my particular heroes. I'll tell you about him some day." She looked down at Harry's suitcase. "But not right now. Is that all your luggage?" "Yes." "You can manage it yourself, can't you? Don't expect a droll stick like me or a silly pink blancmange like her to carry it for you, do you?" "Oh, Bridget, don't say such things. You're as strong as a horse. You know you are." Aunt Florrie took the battered suitcase from Harry's protesting grasp. No, duck, give it to me." Carrying the suitcase as if it was filled with feathers, Auntie Florrie set off after the swinging figure of her sister. Clearly, Harry thought, there was much more to these eccentric old aunts than met the eye. Vigorously he scrubbed the lipstick from his cheeks with a handkerchief and ran to catch up. It was nearly midday. As they left the station and crossed the car park, bonnets shimmered in the heat, leaves hung limply. Above the walls of the small town, the hills were green and dotted with cattle. Long before they approached it, Harry knew which would be his aunt's car. His heart sank. It was ancient, a Mercedes, dull bluey-green in colour, sun-faded and dusty. The bodywork was scratched and there was a bash in one wing. It was, he calculated from the number plate, 17 years old. Auntie Florrie threw his suitcase into the boot and settled herself in the driving seat. "You sit beside me, dear." She patted down the worn leather upholstery. "Bridget will ride in the back." As she turned the key, the engine wheezed and choked, coughed and shook and clanked, and finally settled into an irregular rattle. They left the car park and soon were on the edge of town. "Let's take him by the aerodrome," said Aunt Bridget suddenly. "What a good idea," said Auntie Florrie. "Would you like that?" "Yes," Harry nodded. "What kind of aircraft do you use it? Is it very big?" "Oh, there aren't any aircraft here," said Auntie Florrie. "That's not the idea at all," said Aunt Bridget. "But what's the use of an aerodrome with no planes?" Harry puzzled. "You'll see." The two old ladies laughed. They rattled along leafy lanes, by fields and woods and rivers. Suddenly, around a blind corner, a giant car came hurtling towards them. It was a dazzling Rolls-Royce, yellow as buttercups and doing at least 60 miles an hour. The horn blared, gravel spat from the wheels. Harry had a split-second glimpse of a thick-set man in tweeds, with ginger hair, ginger moustache and a red face. A fat cigar was clamped between his teeth. Angrily, he shook his fist at them. Auntie Florrie swerved across the verge, missing the other cars by inches. Harry's head hit the roof as the old Mercedes leapt like a bucking bronco across the grass. The Rolls-Royce roared up the middle of the road. Tootle, 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 tee. The horn blast mockingly in the distance. The Mercedes bounced off a boulder, demolished a clump of yellow gorse, and came to a halt in the hedge. Hawthorn branches pressed against the windows. Harry's heart thudded with shock. "That man!" Auntie Florrie tidied her claws and took out a little mirror to check her makeup. "That's the other wing bashed in now. He'll go too far one day. He already has many times." Heedless of their near miss, Aunt Bridget was hunting in a box of chocolates. She popped a violet cream into her mouth and pressed the box forward. "Maybe we'll have to do something about dear old Colonel Priestley sooner than planned. We simply cannot have him living around here, spying on us, behaving as if he owns the place, and driving like that. One day there's going to be an accident. Lucky you were at the wheel today, anyone else would have hit him." "We'll have a meeting," Auntie Florrie said. "Yes, but not for a week or two. We've got other things on our plate before that." Auntie Bridget nodded towards Harry. "Passe devant le garçon. We'll talk about it later." With a screechy scrape, the old Mercedes backed out of the thorny branches and returned to the road. But something was wrong. The car bumped awkwardly. The driving wheel twisted in Auntie Florrie's plump hands. "Oh, drat! Now we've got a puncture. Butter that man." They got out. The tyre, which had been in the hedge, was studded with thorns like a porcupine. "Ah, well, soon fix that." Auntie Florrie bustled to the boot and pulled out the spare wheel. "Can I help?" Harry said. "No, leave it to her. This is Florrie sort of thing." In a minute, the car was jacked high and the wheel was being changed. "Who's Colonel Priestley?" asked Harry. Auntie Florrie looked up. "If we had 2 or 3 days, dear, and I wasn't a lady, I could tell you what he was." She spun the wheel spanner briskly. "Colonel Priestley," said Aunt Bridget, hunting the hedgerow for wild raspberries. "Colonel Percival Bonaparte Priestley, D.S.O., to give him his full name, if he is a colonel or a D.S.O., which I doubt, is the new owner of Felon Grange, a big estate quite close to us at Lag Hall. Some people, as you'll discover, call him Beastly Priestley, Percy Big, Boney the Stony, and various less polite names. By profession he's a High Court judge, also a magistrate and a chairman of several local committees. Quite a big cheese, but as you saw, he's not a nice man at all." She tipped a dozen raspberries into Harry's palm. "He's power crazy," she continued. "She sees himself as the lord of the manor, shooting parties, cocktail banquets, fills the house with important people, politicians, millionaires, famous actors, that sort of thing. Gets into the gossip columns." She turned sharp eyes on Harry. "Ah, you ask, but where does a mere judge get the money to buy a place like Felon Grange?" To which I reply, precisely, where does he get the money? She returned to her raspberry picking. "He's so rude," said Auntie Florrie. "That's what I can't stand." "Exactly," said Aunt Bridget, "like a cross between a cow's bottom and a mad Rottweiler. A shark and a mouldy tomato pizza." They both collapsed. Harry had never heard grown-ups talk like this. "Why is he spying on you?" he asked. "Ah, the million-dollar question," Aunt Bridget said. "Why indeed? There's a mystery." "Harry, be a dear," said Aunt Florrie, "while I tighten the nuts. Pull out those thorns on the back tyre. I don't think any are too deep." By the time they'd finished, she was lowering the Mercedes onto the jack, and a minute later they were on their way. "You're a jolly good driver," said Harry, and a good wheel changer." The big baby blue eyes smiled. Affectionately she patted his arm, but she did not answer. A mile further on, the rattling car turned the road to an overgrown track. Swishing grass and thistles grew radiator high. Beyond the bumper, all was hidden. It was like driving through a car wash of twigs. At length they emerged into a vast open space. Ruined hangars and control towers rose against the blue sky. "Built during World War II. Aunt Bridget peered over the granny glasses. "Hasn't been a plane here for 20 years. "Can we get out and explore?" Harry asked. "No time for that today," said Aunt Florrie. "Got to get you to Lags Hall in time for lunch." "But," Harry paused politely, "what do we come for? It's very interesting, but—" "You'll see. Seatbelt fastened safely." "Yes, then off we go." Aunt Florrie stopped the engine and looked under the dashboard. Click, click, click. She snapped 3 switches, then sat back, arranged the floating sleeves of her dress. "Now all ready?" She turned the key. With a smooth, powerful roar, the engine throbbed to life. She touched the accelerator. Vroom, vroom. This was a different motor car. Harry sat up, electrified. "Hold on to your hats then, girls and boys. Away we go." She thrust the car into gear and let out the clutch. Harry felt himself forced back to the upholstery as the Mercedes surged forward. 40, 50, 60, still the car was accelerating. Auntie Florrie moved expertly through the gears. 70, 80. "This is great." Harry's eyes sparkled. 90, 95, 98. Like a doll, with her blue eyes and ringlets, Auntie Florrie glanced sideways and smiled. "Are you ready, dear?" "Yes," said Harry. "Good boy, then up and over. Here we go." Again, Harry felt the leather press against his back as the car accelerated. 100, 110, 120, 130. The dazzling concrete was a blur. A long way ahead, a hare lolloped to the edge of the track. In an instant it was behind them. Harry began to feel frightened. Aunt Florrie wound down a window, and air blasted through the car. "Oh, that's better," cried Aunt Bridget. "Lovely, blow the cobwebs away." Aunt Florrie's scarves flew around the car. For a minute she held the car steady at 140 miles an hour, briefly took it up to 150. "Just for the fun of it, dear," then eased her toes on the accelerator. "I enjoyed that, Florrie," said Aunt Bridget as the car slowed down. "Well, it's a hot day. Natty just fitted a new turbo and did a rebore. Don't want to push her too hard until the pistons have embedded in." She changed down to 4th. "A lot of work he's done over the last couple of weeks. New high-lift camshaft and valve springs, Weber twin-barrel carb. Should give us an extra 12 or 15 miles an hour. Hope so, anyway." Comfortably, they completed a 3rd circuit of the airfield and drew to a halt. "There, dear, did you enjoy that?" said Auntie Florrie. "It was fantastic," said Harry, "but I don't understand. When we left the station it sounded like a heap of old junk. Now it's just like a Ferrari. What did you do to the engines?" "Not an engine, dear. It's got 2 engines." "What for?" Harry puzzled. "Well, sometimes we like to go fast." "Florrie," said her sister in a warning voice. Harry ignored her. "Yes, but why 2 engines?" "Well, for fun, dear." Auntie Florrie reached beneath the dashboard. Click, click, click. Then, as asks no questions. Reluctantly, the old engine popped and clanked and rattled into life. "Come on, one more chocolate, then back to the Lag Hall." "Just in time for a nice sherry." Auntie Florrie smiled. "Or do you prefer gin and tonic?" "I don't drink sherry or gin," Harry said politely. "Don't you, dear?" "Well, how about a vodka and orange with lots of ice?" "What's your tipple? You must try one of my Bunsen blinders. They're delicious." "I don't drink at all," said Harry. "Of course you don't. Don't be a fool, Florrie. You'll get a glass of Goody's homemade squash with lots of fruit on it. That'll do you, Harry. Then lunch." Harry turned in his seat. "Yes, please." Happily, he crunched a hazelnut cluster. Already he'd had more excitement and fun than he'd had in 11 years at Hampstead.